Hello, and welcome to our class, Basics of Whole Food Plant-Based Nutrition. My name is Rachel Murphy, and I'm one of the dietitians here at the Lifestyle Medicine Center. Today, we'll be reviewing the fundamentals of a plant-centered nutrition approach, which foods to increase and those to limit within this nutritional approach, ways to get started, and a few additional resources. So, let's get started. So, what is whole food plant-based? Well, there's not currently a single definition of what a whole food plant-based nutrition approach is. However, for today's purposes, we're going to be focusing on the approach of increasing or maximizing our intake of whole, plant-based, or plant-centered foods, or as I like to think, increasing our intake of foods as grown, while minimizing our intake of processed as well as animal-derived foods. So initially, for some, minimizing our intake is the route to start the process, then eventually moving into omitting animal-based foods and refined products. But for others, it is more of a simplistic approach to just outright omit those refined and processed foods as well as animal-derived foods. So with this, our consumption of meat, dairy products, eggs, as well as our highly refined foods like bleached flour, refined sugars, and oils are either minimized or for some omitted. Benefits of a plant-based approach are listed here. There are a number of benefits, and this is not a complete list. The main focus of this approach is maximizing one's intake of nutrient-rich food choices. So think vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, or increasing nutrition per bite. We emphasize consuming foods associated with reducing inflammation in the body, as well as minimizing our intake of added fats, cholesterol, and salts. For example, whenever you eat less salt, it can help with your blood pressure. And whenever you eat more fiber, particularly whenever your intake is a little bit less than recommended, it can aid in regularity, so no more constipation. With many things in life, the motto of the more you do it, the more benefits you tend to see really plays true here. In addition, this is considered more of a lifestyle approach, so it can also help with things like our mood, our stress, or even our sleep. So here I like to use the visual in reviewing how different foods impact our fullness levels. So each stomach here contains about 400 calories. So if you think of this as a marker of satiety or our feeling of fullness, it is strongly influenced by our quantity of foods that we eat. In this particular example, on the left here, we can see a stomach of about 400 calories worth of oil. So this will give us about 1.6 ounces. So if you were to consume about 1.6 ounces of oil, it really doesn't provide much nutrition other than fat. And this is a fairly small volume of this particular type of food that you could eat. So next we have about a 7.6 ounce serving of roasted chicken drumsticks with the skin on. So this once again will provide about 400 calories. So it is a little bit more volume in comparison to that oil. But let's go ahead and check out the last option here. So here we have 400 calories worth of vegetables. So we're using the example of spinach, eggplant, and beans. So with this one, it's surprisingly about 2.5 pounds that equates to that 400 calories. So as you can kind of see across the board, the same amount of calories are listed, but the source of the calories varies greatly. So additionally, think of all the different vitamins, minerals, fibers, and antioxidants and anti-inflammatory intake that you're getting from those from those vegetables as you eat these types of foods. So with plant-based food choices, a smaller volume tends to provide a greater amount of fullness, And then generally, plant foods can help us eat a little bit more volume while helping us to stay satiated or that fullness feeling. So with this, we don't have to count calories or even use any type of measuring cups, nothing like that. Our goal instead is to be mindful, now focusing on how our bodies are feeling, what it's telling us, and achieving a point of feeling satisfaction at meal times. So this is a process that we aim for, and remember, with all new things, it takes time. So begin to practice listening to what your body is telling you. This is more of a gentle nutrition concept or approach. And so on this particular hunger scale, you can see it ranges from 1 all the way to 10. 1 is kind of that point of feeling dizzy, weak, or sometimes people call it hangry. And then on the flip side, we have 10, where we're feeling so full that you almost feel sick. With this particular scale, I like to kind of use the values that we try to aim in to stay within is between this 3 to 6. At 3, our hunger starts to awaken, or as it states here, our stomach's beginning to growl. And for me, this is where I would say, okay, my body's telling me it's time to eat, so let's honor that. At the 6, this is where we feel pleasantly full. So on this particular scale, I'd recommend a minimum value of 3 and that goal fullness value of about a 6. We want to be satisfied and not uncomfortable, either too hungry or too full. But remember, with this approach, it does take time and it takes practice to understand where your fullness and hunger levels are. So start tuning into what your body is telling you. This is not an approach that emphasizes any type of diet mentality. Instead, we try to have things like our regular meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, eating at regular meal times. This helps our body use that consistent source of energy, and over time, this becomes more of a natural way of eating. So it's going to be up to you to modify your dietary choices. Not every day will necessarily be perfect, but the ultimate goal is to modify our intake for nutrient-rich options and incorporate those more regularly into your lifestyle. Over time, we can think of this as foods that we consume more often, and those types of foods that we consume less often or even omit, depending on your personal goals. Whenever we reduce the foods under the limit section, we're focusing on maximizing the foods on the increase section to help create balance to our nutrition. Depending on your goals, you can decide if you want to eat plant-centered 100% of the time, or 50% of the time, or really somewhere in between. Because honestly, it's up to you. Overall, we want to increase the foods that are beneficial for us. For many, increasing our produce, whole grains, starchy vegetables, and heart-healthy sources of fat becomes easier the more that you practice it. So we have a simple food list here of those to increase and those to minimize or limit. As you decrease your animal-based choices, naturally, the intake of your saturated fat and cholesterol will decrease because both saturated fat and cholesterol are readily found in animal products. All right, so ways to get started. Start to incorporate it into your daily routine. So I always encourage start with where you're at. You don't have to be 100% initially to be successful. Gradually increasing your variety of plant-based options is a great approach to start. Something as simple as eating a larger portion of vegetables is a nice place to start, making animal protein more of the side dish instead of the main course. Also, focus on your progress. Transitioning can be helpful. Start with your own food and then try to make some of those options meatless. I always emphasize adding variety to your foods as well. So some may try the approach of making a burrito bowl. Start with adding a little bit more color of your vegetables to your bowl, so different types of vegetables. For others, try a bowl without the meat. so more of like a veggie option. Explore how these foods make you feel after eating them too, so kind of reflecting back on that mindfulness approach. And remember, as you increase your dietary fiber, do so gradually to aid in the tolerance, and making sure that you're drinking enough water can also help with some of those digestive symptoms. But reflecting back on this, some of those other approaches, trying like a meatless Monday or let's meatless Wednesday might be the right approach. And then gradually add in a few more days as you go. So instead of 1 day a week, let's do it 2 or 3. So adding more vegetables, whole grains, and or beans or lentils to your current nutrition can be helpful. Maybe even using a whole wheat pasta, using some different types of beans is also another great way to add a little bit more variety. So using whole grains like brown rice, quinoa, barley, steel-cut oats or old-fashioned oats, or even wild rice are some helpful ways that you can add some more different varieties to your current intake. Also, focus on what you're gaining and not what you're giving up. We're gaining our health. So we're crowding out some of those unhealthful food choices or lifestyle choices and making room for the more healthful and more nourishing foods and lifestyle approaches overall. And a big one here I like to emphasize is setting realistic goals for your lifestyle change. You want to make sure it is something realistic, especially if you're starting it out and you're a little hesitant at first. So I will make 1 new healthy recipe for dinner this week using beans instead of meat. Something as simple as this can be helpful. Or for others, beginning this weekend, I'll fill 2/3 of my plate with vegetables and fruits at every meal, at least 4 days a week. These are some realistic goals that we can start to incorporate as we transition into this plant-based lifestyle. So alter your own recipes first. This is a great place to start at home because you hold the keys to what you're eating. A few easy examples can include something like bean burritos instead of a beef or chicken burrito. Or you can go a step further and take out the meat and instead use rice, beans, salsa, guacamole, lettuce, tomatoes, radishes, whatever type of vegetables you want to add to it. Another option is trying something like a bean chili without the meat. So maybe something like a 3-bean variety, and then add some fire roasted tomatoes in there. As a side note, using canned vegetables is acceptable. Fresh, frozen, or canned options are okay. For canned produce, I emphasize using no salt added. If it does have any salt added to it, like you can't find it or they're out of it at the grocery store, try rinsing those canned vegetables, at least twice under water, and that will help reduce some of that sodium content. The same goes for frozen vegetables. If you're looking at the frozen section, we want to find something that's just the plain, no added sauces to your produce. So the plain select broccoli without the added flavor blends because that usually has some added fat and or salt. So a few other examples include something like vegetable and minestrone soup, using vegetable broth or stock, or adding some type of tofu to your meals, doing that with mixed vegetables, almost like a stir-fry dish, different grilling vegetables, or even grilling your fruits to help emphasize some of those natural sugars, and it takes on a really great flavor as well. So here we have a plant-based plate. I enjoyed the beautiful visual example of Juliana Heaver here that she's created for an example of a balanced plant-based plate. Like we said, this is a simple guide to show the variety of foods. It doesn't have to be textbook, but I like her example to provide the baseline of food variety. There's not necessarily any limits, just a general guide for the diversity of various foods. So as you can see on this page, let's go to fruit. She says fruit, all types, consume 2 to 4 servings every day. So 1 piece or 1/2 of a cup is considered 1 serving to again give you those general guidelines. If you were to eat something like a pear, an orange, and an apple, that would give you 3 servings of fruit. With this one can always vary the amount, so remember that this level is adjustable. Another area that I like to emphasize with a lot on this page is the whole grains section. This includes things like your brown rice, your barley, some of those ancient grains. She shows the example of 6 to 11 servings, so anywhere from 1/2 of a cup cooked, or let's say you use 1 slice of a whole grain bread. Each one of those is considered 1 serving. So remember, if you're going to be using, 1/2 of a cup approximately of a barley, that would give you 1 serving. If you were to have a whole cup, that would give you 2. So you can adjust those based on your personal needs. Also, we have things like our legumes. Those are the beans, peas, lentils. We have the example of 2 to 3 servings every day. Per 1/2 of a cup gives you about 1 of those servings. So at least a whole cup in a day is recommended. Then she has vegetables, including all types, like your starchy and your non-starchy. Variety and emphasizing different amounts is perfectly great. Then she uses the example of leafy green vegetables such as collard, spinach, and kale, at least 2 to 3 servings. 1 cup raw is considered 1 serving, or 1/2 of a cup cooked. So at least 2 to 3 servings every day. So as we said, this is just a general guide and example of different food choices to have. So here I've compiled a list of additional resources. One of the options that I really like to just straightforward go with is a web search. If you type in to your browser whole food plant-based recipes, this is a really great way to kind of start to explore, get your feet wet with some of those choices, and really start to navigate through a variety of options. Another resource I really like to use is the Physicians Committee of Responsible Medicine, or PCRM.org. They have a really helpful plant-based nutrition recipe resource, a lot of different media that you can read through, but they have this great option of a 21-day kickstart. It's 21 days worth of meal plan that you can browse through, and it kind of creates it for you. And it's a great way to get started, 21 days. Another option that they have is just straight recipe choices where you can kind of browse through and start to create, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, appetizers, and all of these recipes are plant-based. So it's really helpful to use some of these resources. Then they have various other options like this Eating Well. They have a really great resource. It's Plant-Based Diet for Beginners, Your Guide to Getting Started, and they also have a meal plan available for a pretty straightforward type of meal, focusing on plant-based choices. And another online resource I really like to use, it goes through how to transition every step of the way as this running on real food. This author, she goes through a lot of different barriers and hurdles and how to kind of address those one at a time. So I encourage using your resources and really playing through some of those choices that are beneficial and help you with your success. So this brings us to the conclusion of our class today. If you have any questions or if you're interested in a one-on-one consult with a dietitian here at the Lifestyle Medicine Center, please give us a call at 432-221-5433. Thank you.